Welcome everyone to the Lofi Poli Sci podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pickering. That's right, Lo-Fi's and low fidelity, low quality, in your face, messy as can be global news show. Here we're going to talk about that famous question, what's going on in the world today? We'll be covering 5 headlines from across the globe and then choose one to go into a more detailed analysis. For our third story today, we'll be focusing on the country of Russia with that lo-fi style country profile. But first, the news, fresh off the press. Source, BBC News, Africa section. Detained Burundi politician Kathy Kizimana freed after elections. The country of Burundi has just completed elections where, right before the elections, many candidates from political parties opposing the ruling government were arrested for insulting the ruling party. Wait, say what? I spy something fishy with all this. The implications. The election results, as reported by France 24, is that the ruling party's candidate for president has won the election with 68% of the vote, though opposition parties say the election was rigged. And let's see why exactly they say this. Freedom House gives Burundi a 13 out of 100 freedom score, placing the country in the not free category. The very, very not free category at that. More and more around the world, we see governments arresting people to make them ineligible to run for office, which is exactly what happened here. To quote Freedom House, democratic gains made after the 12-year civil war ended in 2005 have been undone by a shift toward authoritarian politics and violent repression against anyone perceived to oppose the ruling party. End quote. This story is simply an example of what exactly Freedom House is saying. We'll be keeping a close eye on you, Burundi. Next up, source, NPR, Middle East section. A shaky coalition government takes office in Israel. Shaky is a good way of putting it, NPR. This story goes back a couple of weeks, but it's well worth covering to see and to tease out the finer intricacies about what's really going down in Israel. So what is this power-sharing arrangement? Netanyahu remains prime minister for the first 18 months. Then, his opposition, Gantz, takes the role of prime minister for the next 18 months. It's the good old switcheroo maneuver. Let's see how this works. The implications. Well, there's quite a few. First off, Netanyahu is now on trial for corruption, which could see him ousted from office, in which case, theoretically, Gantz would take the PM spot. Then there's the issue of this coalition being split on curbing judicial independence in the country. Netanyahu wants to, Gantz does not. And then there's the annexation of the West Bank. Netanyahu wants to, Gantz does not unless there is support from the international community, which there isn't. You see, Lo-Fi Nation, there's a lot of split and differences on major Israeli issues within this coalition. And if this coalition doesn't come together on these issues, then we could very well see the need for yet another snap election. We'll keep everyone updated as this story develops into the future for sure. And now it's time for our country profile of the day on Russia. Geography lesson, Lo-Fi Nation. Russia is massive. Its borders, starting to the north, the Arctic Ocean. To the east, the Pacific Ocean. To the south, many countries, starting with North Korea, China, Mongolia, China again, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. And to the west we have Ukraine, Belarus, Poland, in a weird way, look at a map and you'll see what I mean, then Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Finland, and Norway. That's 2 oceans and 14 countries. Wow, Russia, that's a lot of borders. Russia as a country goes back over 1,000 years. The exact date of when you want to say Russia was created is a matter of perspective. But for our purposes, just know, Russia has been around for a while, over 1,000 years. The World Bank GDP per capita in 2018 was just over $28,500. Freedom House, covering civil liberties and civil rights around the world, gave Russia a 20 out of 100, which is a not free rating. Reporters Without Borders, ranking 180 countries and territories across the globe via media freedoms, puts the country's ranking at 149 out of 180. Transparency International, with its ranking of 180 countries and territories across the globe via their Corruption Perception Index, puts Russia in its global rankings as 137 out of 180. In short, Russia is a huge country, an old country, doing fairly well as far as economic development, though not well as far as being a democracy. So what's been happening in Russia lately? Well, in short, Putin is trying to beat Joseph Stalin's record for longest reigning leader of the country. And how is he doing this, you may ask? Well, before what global conditions currently are, he proposed an amendment to the Constitution granting him an additional 2 terms in office, if elected, of course. At the moment, he's termed out and due to leave office in 2024. But if the amendment passes, once they can actually have a countrywide referendum, he could possibly stay in power until 2036. And in case you're wondering, the referendum will pass, and he will win the next 2 presidential elections. There's no doubt in my mind, Lo-Fi Nation. But what does this mean for Russia? Well, it likely means we are not going to see any trends towards democracy in the country anytime soon. But it also means that Putin will be able to put in place long-term economic planning that most democratic countries can't. So, it is likely that Russia's economy will continue to do better and better as time goes on. However, that doesn't mean that everyone in the country will benefit from that economic growth. But for now, we'll just have to wait and see. Let me know, Lo-Fi Nation. Write in. Tell me if you think Putin will stay in power until 2036. And now for our headline in the Spotlight segment. Source, BBC News Technology section. Google in $5 billion lawsuit for tracking in private mode. That's right, people. You thought you were safe in your privacy settings online? Think again. Google, and everyone else for that matter, is still tracking you even when you put your Google Chrome browser to be incognito. The background and implications of this story. You remember that time when the internet was anonymous? Most of you probably don't, because it ended so quickly. Privacy, anonymity, your own circle/corner of the net just for you. Well, it simply doesn't exist anymore, and people are suing Google for lying to them about it. Of course, Google says it didn't lie and it was upfront about the data tracking. And of course, people say Google is lying. So now the courts will decide. And for those of us with YouTube channels, which Google owns, don't worry, even if Google loses, they have plenty enough money to stay afloat. The implications. If you want privacy, stay unplugged and turn off your phone, which can be turned back on. But wait, that's a conversation for another day. Because now it's time for our last piece of news from Reuters World News, Aerospace and Defense section. SpaceX Crew Dragon delivers 2 NASA astronauts to International Space Station. That's right, yay for capitalism, commercialization, and privatization of space flights for NASA. This weekend, a SpaceX shuttle, owned by Elon Musk, left the US and went to space for the first time in 9 years since the NASA Space Shuttle program was abandoned. The astronauts safely landed and joined the International Space Station crew this week. This is the first of the future where NASA relies on private corporations for sending its people into the unknown. The implications? Well, you tell me this time, Lo-Fi Nation. Is the privatization and commercialization of space travel a good thing or a bad? Write in and let me know your thoughts. And that's a brief snapshot of what's going on in the world today. Always remember that Lofi Poli Sci is more than just me. It's the we that we be. Please write in with your questions, comments, or requests for countries for our news segments, or top 10 global lists you want to see to lofi-poli-sci@planetmail.com. That's Lofi, L-O-F-I, Poli, P-O-L-I, Sci, S-C-I, @planetmail.com. Let me say thank you so much for listening. Stay safe, wash those hands, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Lofi Poli Sci podcast. Pickering, signing off.